Welcome back in. Today we're going to discuss some of my favorite kickers for Week 12. We're also going to get into some guys you can look at streaming this week. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First up, we're going to talk about Chris Boswell. Now, Chris Boswell could really go in either category here because he's definitely one of the top kickers of the week, but he's still rostered in around 60% of leagues. So he is sitting out there. And he's been one of the best fantasy kickers this season. He trails only Kaimi Fairbairn in kicks of 50-plus yards. It has been one of the most reliable kickers this year. He's converted 97% of his attempts this year. He's averaging more than 13 fantasy points per game. Only one other kicker is averaging 13 or more fantasy points this year. Boswell's a top 5 kicker rest of season and really a top 5 kicker this week. So I absolutely love Chris Boswell this week. Next up is Cameron Dicker. He's been on quite the heater lately. He scored 9 or more fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games. It has moved up to the kicker 6 overall and averaging 10 fantasy points per game. He's converted 92% of his field goals and 11 from 40 and 50-plus yards. This week, the Chargers get an awesome matchup against the Ravens. This game has one of the highest totals on the weekend, making Cameron Dicker a very strong option this week. Next up, I want to mention the Washington kickers. Austin Seibert was the number 1 kicker in fantasy prior to going down with a hip injury a few weeks ago. Since then, his ownership has dropped down to 38%. If Seibert is able to return this week, he should be viewed as a locked-in top 5 kicker this week. If he misses another week, Zane Gonzalez would fill that same role, and because he's filled that role nicely, scoring 11 and 5 fantasy points in his last 2 games. If Seibert misses, like I said, Zane should be considered a top 10 option himself and a viable streaming option this week. But I really want to access either one of these kickers. I think both of these guys are good plays. You know, whichever one is the one that is going to start is the one I want. Austin Seibert, hopefully he can get back this week because he was absolutely phenomenal before going down with that injury. So we'll have to wait and see on that one, but that is definitely something to monitor. And then Chad Ryland has been solid filling in for Matt Prater. He's finished as a top 12 kicker in 3 of the 6 games and has scored 7 or more in 5 of the 6 games this season. He's averaging nearly 9 fantasy points per game this year and has converted 92% of his field goals. Ryland remains entrenched as a top 12 kicker this week. Now let's move over to some streaming options for you this week. First up is going to be Chase McLaughlin versus the Giants, rostered in 25% of leagues. Has been one of the more accurate kickers this season, converting 94% of his attempts. He's also been one of the most reliable fantasy kickers this season, scoring 7 or more fantasy points in 7 of 9 games this season. He's currently averaging about over 9 fantasy points per game as the kicker 12 on the season. He currently ranks top 5 and kicks at 50-plus yards as well. The Bucs are 5.5-point favorites against the Giants, and we'll be getting a good boost to their offense with a likely return of Mike Evans this week. So McLaughlin is a safe bet as a top 10 kicker this week. Next up is Will Lutz. Lutz has been a pretty solid kicker this season. He's currently the kicker 10 and has converted the most kicks of 40-plus yards this year. While his 2 kicks of 50-plus yards is less than ideal, he continues to be a consistent source of fantasy production and is on an offense that continues to get better every single week. This week, the Broncos head to Vegas to take on a Raiders team that has yielded the 3rd most fantasy points to kickers this season. Next up is Spencer Schrader for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs signed Schrader off the Jets practice squad after losing Harrison Butker to a knee injury that will cost him at least 4 games. In 3 games this season that Schrader has played with the Colts, Jets, and Chiefs, he hasn't missed a field goal. The Chiefs have attempted the 7th most field goals per drive this season, and Panthers have given up the 4th most fantasy points to kickers. So I do think Spencer Schrader is another option you can take a look at. I reached my bag this week looking for a sleeper option, and I think I have it for you. That's Joey Sly, rostered in 2% of leagues. Sly has started to find footing recently with back-to-back top 8 finishes. Since week 7, when Drake May took over, the Patriots are top 12 in field goal attempts per drive and get a matchup against the Dolphins, who have allowed the most fantasy points to kickers this season. So I do think Joey Sly is another kind of sneaky play this week as well. If you're in a deeper league and a lot of these kickers aren't available, Joey Sly definitely should be rostered in less than 2% of leagues. I know the offense isn't necessarily fantastic, but they have looked better with Drake May. So I do think Joey Sly is another option. So with that being said, let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions, guys, you're wondering about. Maybe you should drop, you should add. Let me know in the comment section below. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.